A lot of people look at the cost of a mortgage and the cost of rent and then decide that owning a home is just too expensive, but there is so much more that needs to be weighed up when you're deciding whether to buy a home or whether to rent. If you're currently caught in the crossroads of the New Zealand housing market and you're struggling to decide whether to rent or whether to buy, then today's video is for you. In today's video, I'll be exploring both the pros and the cons of buying a home versus renting a property, and talking about all the associated costs that you need to think about, and also discussing some other key factors that you need to think about and consider when making your decision. I'm hoping by the end of this video, you'll be able to make an informed choice that aligns with your lifestyle, financial aspirations, and your long-term goals. As always, feel free to skip around the timestamps to save time. Let's get into it. First up, let's look at the option of buying a home. Buying a home offers several advantages. First, it allows you to build equity over time by providing a valuable asset. This asset may provide a potential source of future wealth accumulation. When you make mortgage payments, you're not only paying off your loan, but you're building property equity. This equity can then be used as collateral for future loans. Maybe in the future you might like to buy an investment property or a batch or a second home. Or you can cash this out when you sell the property. You're also adding to your net worth as you pay off your mortgage and the property value increases over time. Being a homeowner also offers you a sense of stability and security. This is something that you might not get when you're renting a property. You also get the freedom to make changes and customize your property without having to seek any approval from a landlord. When you rent a house, you're at the mercy of someone else, a landlord, and you may be asked to vacate the property anytime, which is a huge problem that renters all over New Zealand are currently facing. When you're a homeowner, you also don't have to worry about rent increases year on year. You can have a certain level of control over what your mortgage repayments are going to be, and you can also have the flexibility to increase your repayments and pay your loan off faster if you want to. However, there are some downsides to owning a home. There are high upfront costs that you need to factor in, like your deposit, legal expenses, and moving expenses. The upfront costs can be especially difficult for first-time home buyers who may not have the savings and may take years to save up the required 5, 10, 20% deposit. This can easily be in the 10 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. The other upfront costs that you would need to cover would be your legal fees, which can easily be in the thousands of dollars. You may also need to get a valuation and a weather tightness or building report as well. After all of your upfront costs, you then have your ongoing costs associated with owning the home. The biggest one of these is going to be your mortgage payment. This can fluctuate a little bit depending on what interest rates are doing and depending upon what kind of structure you have in place for your mortgage. As a homeowner, you must also always get home insurance if you're taking out a mortgage with the lender. This is compulsory from the lenders, so it is an ongoing cost that you need to factor in. This is also a cost that can increase year on year. As a homeowner, you also bear the responsibility for ongoing maintenance and repair costs. These can accumulate over time and strain your financial resources. The maintenance can be time-consuming and costly, especially if you're not handy or don't have the time or the resources to take care of your property yourself. For example, one of the things that we have to take care of and maintain ourselves is mowing our lawns and then also paying for the grass removal. Also, when we first moved into our property, we had to put a new roof on, which set us back financially. Unfortunately, it was something that needed to be done and couldn't be delayed, so we had to suck it up and pay the cost. If we were renting and the property needed a new roof, it's something that we wouldn't have had to worry about, and it's something that the landlord would have had to take care of and pay for. Additionally, you'll also need to pay council rates, which seem to be increasing year on year all around New Zealand as well. All of these costs add up and add to the ongoing costs of owning a home in New Zealand. Other ongoing costs are your utilities bills, like your power, your water, gas, internet, telephone. Homeowners may also get insurance for their belongings inside their house, and this is another cost that you'd need to factor in and think about. The housing market is also subject to fluctuations and economic uncertainties, which can pose risks to homeowners' investment and also financial stability. Finally, home ownership ties you to a specific location. You don't get that same mobility and flexibility that you can get when you're renting. If you don't love where you live or you want to move for whatever reason, then you have to undergo the process of selling a property, which can be time consuming and costly. Next up, let's look at renting a home. So renting a home has its own set of advantages. It typically has lower upfront costs, which makes it more accessible to anyone who has limited savings. You'll generally only need to pay a bond, which is typically 1 month's worth of rent upfront. The ongoing cost for renters is basically your rent and then your bills for your utilities. You may need to check with your landlord who is covering water and wastewater, as sometimes landlords opt to cover this and as part of your rent. If gas is the way that the property heats water and also for cooking food, then the landlord must supply access to a gas supply. The tenant will usually pay for any gas that is used. However, do check with your landlord, as sometimes this can again be included in the rent. As a tenant, when you're renting, you may also like to have insurance for your belongings called contents insurance. Renting offers you flexibility, so if you want to relocate, you can easily do this without having the burden of needing to sell a property. As a renter, you're generally not responsible for any costs associated with any ongoing maintenance or repairs on the property that you're living in as well. As a renter, you can anticipate fixed monthly expenses with your rent, and you don't need to worry about fluctuations in mortgage repayments with changing interest rates or having to pay for any repairs or maintenance. However, there are some disadvantages to renting as well. When you're renting, you don't get the opportunity to build equity or accumulate wealth as you would for owning a property. Instead, when you're renting, what you're helping your landlord to do is build equity in their property. Basically, you're buying your landlord a house. Another thing that you aren't potentially growing when you're renting is your net worth, and instead you're building someone else's net worth. Renters have limited control over their living spaces. They may also be subject to landlord restrictions and changes to their rental terms. Renting lacks that long-term stability and security that you'd get with home ownership. You also have the risk of rent increases or even terminations. When you rent, you're at the mercy of someone else. If they decide that they want to move into the property or sell the property, then you have to relocate. This can be really stressful if you need to find another property to rent. This can be even more of a nightmare if you're a family with children, and especially children who are at school in the local area that you're renting. It may be hard to find another property to rent in the same local area. Rent can also increase year on year, and it can be really stressful if you haven't had a pay increase and you need to suddenly find some more money within your budget to cover your rent. When deciding whether to buy or rent in New Zealand, several factors should be considered. You need to assess your financial situation. You need to look at your savings, your income stability, and also decide what your long-term goals are to see whether the home ownership path is right for you. You also should take into consideration the current housing market trends. You need to look at property prices, rental rates, and also availability. This will help you to gauge market dynamics and potential investment opportunities. You need to also look at your lifestyle preference and your potential future plans. You also need to think about your desired level of flexibility and then align your housing choice with your goals. You also need to assess your risk tolerance. You also need to think about if you can handle the potential market fluctuations and also the potential financial uncertainties that come with home ownership as opposed to renting. In New Zealand, property ownership is highly valued and considered important for a reason, and that is when it comes to your retirement. Being a property owner can provide you with a level of security that you may need in retirement. Unfortunately, secure rentals are rare anywhere in New Zealand, and it's unlikely that the situation will improve anytime soon. Additionally, the government's on and off efforts to increase immigration to New Zealand add to the pressure, especially on housing availability. This can make it really challenging for renters to secure a property. Land prices are flat or decreasing around New Zealand, while the build costs are increasing, so we're not seeing as many new builds coming around as we used to. It's just not as profitable to build new homes as it once was. What this means is that there could be a shortage of rentals later on. New Zealand superannuation operates under the assumption that retirees are homeowners and also mortgage free. We know the reality is actually very different to this, with 1 in 5 retirees renting, which is stressful, and there doesn't seem to be a way out. The prospect of renting for life does not inspire a sense of security. Renters are often and unfairly viewed negatively throughout New Zealand. They have almost no say in the decision regarding their living arrangements. They're often limited to what they can afford and have little power. Property ownership avoids having your life disrupted on the whims of a landlord. The decision to rent for life may seem like a good idea now as it's convenient. However, it's impossible to predict how much rental prices may increase. Rental costs increase, whereas mortgage payments seem to stay fairly consistent over time. Many people seem to regret later on in life that they did not buy a property. At retirement, renters may have to use their superannuation funds to cover their rent rather than using that money for leisure and enjoyment. Being debt-free at retirement is crucial, and owning a property increases the likelihood of achieving this goal. Ultimately, the decision between buying a property and renting in New Zealand comes down to your lifestyle, your priorities, and your preferences. Each option does offer its own unique advantages as well as its disadvantages. By weighing up the pros and cons of each option and seeking professional advice and support, you can come to a decision that is right for you. Your decision needs to align with your housing needs, your financial aspirations, and also your long-term goals. Let me know in the comments your thoughts about renting versus buying and what the right option is for you. If you are considering buying a home, then you might like to check out my other video, which I'll link up over here, and it's all about the first home deposit requirements in New Zealand for 2024. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.